Welcome to SoundBreaker. In today's episode, we're talking to Bobby Barbiere, who is the Executive Vice President and General Manager, or GM, at OpenPlay. And OpenPlay happened to be one of my favorite, actually, platform. If you are a record label owner or distributor and you want to get your content organized and delivered the way you want it, definitely OpenPlay. They didn't pay me for this. No, I just personally went through a tour with Bob and also one of the co-founder or founder, Edward. And I was impressed. I was actually floored. I've been to a lot of platforms out there, a lot of aggregators, but this platform actually set the new precedence of distribution and metadata and content. Anyhow, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you, my friend. And for our listeners who might not be familiar with you or heard of you, who you are, and your list of accolades, please give us a quick introduction and we're going to dive right into it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me, Bob. It's an absolute pleasure. We're very fond of this podcast. It's one of the best in the industry for sure.
Podcast. I like that. Podcast.
The podcast. Yeah. It's definitely an interesting area with rights and open play, and it's one that I've been in most of my career, spanning from telecom into music. We'll probably jump into different areas of it, but yeah, we're super excited about some of the new products coming out. We were super engaged and happy to have you take a look at it, and glad to hear that you really enjoyed it.
Big fan, my friend. Big fan. And partnership definitely is on the way together. Bob, let's go back a bit, and what really put you on that path? What influenced you to say, "Hey, I want to be in the music business"? Were you influenced by your parents? If we go back to your teenage days and say, "Hey, what really put you on that path?"
I was more into sports than I was music, but music was always an important part of my culture, my life. What was interesting is I actually came into music tech from the telecom world. So I was part of a founding executive team of a company called Arbanet, and we built a digital trading and routing exchange that ultimately grew to $2 billion in revenue, telecom traffic revenue. We were managing, within 4 or 5 years of launch, 10% of all the world's international voice traffic. And it was around 2007. We had gone public. The company asked me to look beyond telecom for some growth opportunities. And what became clear to me at that point was that our ability to route analog and digital traffic, track and settle those transactions, certainly could apply to more than just telecom, voice, and data. And it was around that time that I saw the early shift from physical to digital. Downloads were growing, distribution options were limited, industry lacked scalable infrastructure, and I knew that the platform I had built, the data delivery and settlement technologies, could solve that. What I didn't know was really anything about the music industry and how it operated. So I started by acquiring the company that had the key IP and digital distribution, launched a service called Rights Router, and we very quickly became the largest digital distributor in music at that time. That was around 2009. Yeah.
So you're one of the early startups, or I should say, initiators in the digital distribution, right after the Orchard, probably, because the Orchard was the first one.
IOTA was our main competitor at the time. Yeah.
Amazing. You've been in the business for quite some time. Probably could write a book on it. And what is, I would say, one of the main issues that's always been swept under the rug when it comes to the music industry. And the music industry knows it. Not just they don't know it, but it's a mess to go back and fix it.
It's funny because that was where I ended up next in music, Bob. So Dubset was a company that I was approached by their board, and they asked if I could build a company around a very brilliant founder. And it was one of those cases where the mission just matched my background. And I think this remains today a great challenge in the music industry, which is derivative works. Today, derivative works are very much in the form of AI. But at the time, Dubset was trying to solve a really impossible problem. How do you clear derivative works, right? DJs, remixes, sampling. How do you do it at global scale? And I saw that if you could get the data model right, if you can incorporate a rights registry and set up a proper commercial framework around it, you could actually unlock a massive layer of monetization. DJ mixes alone represent 20 million hours of content a year, new content.
Wow.
And imagine in 2011, those 20 million hours were all completely unmonetized, completely free, and sitting on the platforms of SoundCloud and YouTube. So no one was really tackling it with a technical and rights first approach, and that's really what we did with Dubset.
So that was really kind of your first intro where we really dived in the music business.
That's
Started
where I
with
got
kind of,
into the yeah, that's where I got into the weeds of it, Bob. And then we did a lot of innovative work at Dubset. And one of the things we had to start with, which is something near and dear to your own heart, is a registry. Right? It all began with the registry. When we got acquired, in fact, we had the world's largest fully unified recording and publishing registry of 55 million songs. It was one of the primary drivers of us being acquired.
mm,
But in order to resolve and clear rights real time, imagine a mix is 23 songs. It's 127 rights owners. We had to have a active, live, and accurate rights registry of really any recordings and works that existed in the world, because you didn't know organically what was going to get uploaded to your platform and what you'd have to clear. And our registry contained all the recording, composition, ownership splits, performers, sample, derivatives, all the joints really of a metadata ecosystem. And then the breakthrough for me and Dubset came when really we stopped trying to mimic legacy systems. They just weren't working. So we designed this new multi-layer identifier model that could represent any type of asset and relationship. And then we built ingestion pipelines, struck a partnership with the NMPA on the publishing side, did our deals with the majors in Merlin. And it's that interoperability which made sort of real-time automated clearance possible.
wow. So pretty much basically one of the biggest nightmares. I mean, as much as they're fun to listen to and enjoy, and people love them, DJ mixes. Back in the day, till to this day, I would say, but a lot of the big DJs use their own music to create their own mix. So nobody has the rights beside them, their own creation. But the majority of the stuff out there, these DJ mixes, as you said, what are there, 12 songs or there are 30 songs or 50 songs that mixed up all in 1 hour? It's a nightmare to put the paperwork for it and to figure out whose gets what and whose song was played longer and who's the publishers and writers and the composers and all of that.
Sadly,
And
Bob, it could take up to a year to clear a single song. Like a single song to be remixed
yes,
could go through, the label and five publishers process for a year. I've watched it, so many times over and over. Really great remixes that attempted to go through the proper licensing process just failed to make it through. There's always a timeliness, and sensitivity to windows with music. And what ended up
correct.
happening is that, that phrase that we all know all too well, which is beg for forgiveness later, release it now, beg for forgiveness later. And that's what that entire industry sort of built itself around. And sadly, at the time, and probably less so today, but certainly really in 2010 through 2015, the DJ community was really seen more as pirates and pariah. Like they were the next wave of Napster, right? They were stealing everybody's music and putting these remixes up, and people were going to these other platforms to listen to it, and rights holders weren't getting paid money. And the reality is that the DJs weren't doing it for the money. SoundCloud, they were making nothing on SoundCloud and YouTube, right? They were doing it because that's what they did, that's what they loved, they were creative, and B, it built the brand for them. What we learned real quickly at Dubset is the DJs didn't care if they got a penny from the mix. What was important to them is that it gave them public visibility to
Mhm.
their brand and to their own future and career that they desperately needed.
Elevated their brand and got them more work actually for remixing because
A-
of they heard what they done. Yes.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I remember back in the day, it never wasn't called a bootleg. It was called a white label because nobody knows who released it, who's behind it. you
That's
know,
right.
you go to the I remember some of these vinyl shops, and you'll find a white label, and you just there's a stamp, like a regular actual stamp with an ink. Somebody's hand stamped it. That was the
Yeah.
value of these white labels, if you remember back in the days.
Yeah.
And there were remixes of big songs, really interesting remixes.
We were told by every single, personally, I was told by every single executive in the music industry, Bob, you're doing a noble thing. It's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
If you ever solve this, the fan gets legal music, the rights holders get paid, the platforms get to distribute it legally, the DJ get to build their brands. Like, this is the win-win-win-win. Here's your problem. You're never going to be able to identify what's in the mix. You'll never figure out who owns it and who's administering the rights on it. And even if you knew that, how you ever going to get a license cleared across 23 songs when any individual song takes months or a year to clear? And when we were acquired, we were able to ingest any DJ mix and within 30 seconds identify every song in it, know every
Wow.
rights owner and administrator, and have had the clearance profile of whether it was cleared or not across all 120 plus rights owners of that song and distribute it to a major music service all in 30 seconds.
Wow. It
Yeah.
sounds like PEX to me, which you joined later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that was quite interesting. Nobody in the industry really understood why PEX, who was a company then known for just crawling and scanning all of the UGC sites, was interested in Dubset, which was this sort of DJ, mixed distribution and rights attribution platform. But at its core, PEX was a rights attribution company, and when PEX acquired Dubset, my focus shifted from solving derivative works clearance and monetization to broader global rights attribution. It was across music, it was across video, it was across film. PEX was attempting to take on attribution at scale and speed fast enough to satisfy what it felt were going to be Article 17 and the Copyright Act coming out of the EU, what those requirements were going to be. So
mm,
PEX wasn't about identifying and clearing any specific form of content. It was literally built to scan 60,000 hours of music a minute and clear any rights of any type of media in milliseconds.
amazing.
Yeah.
And PEX now being used by almost every distributor and every aggregator.
Yeah, PEX sort of found its way back into the fingerprinting space. It was always best in class fingerprinting technology. Fingerprinting just happens to be one of those commoditized industry segments. And so
Hmm.
the company for many years just leaned away from it. Now they're leaning back into it and utilizing it for some really interesting revenue bearing opportunities. Yeah.
Bob, you have a really interesting background and I would say an encyclopedia of information on metadata, publishing, and rights management. That's a very I think in order to gain that kind of knowledge, literally now you would have to go to school for it. I don't know if they teach you. There's actually
Mhm.
a school for that, but this is a lot of valuable information that you hold in your head and now then you gain throughout the years because this is one of the biggest. I said it earlier. One of the biggest, I would say, issues in the industry: metadata, rights, publishing, all of this. It doesn't matter if you got the MLC, you got ASCAP, CSAC, you got BMI, you got Sound Exchange, and that's only in America. And there's more probably. And then you go to Canada, you go to France, and they all supposedly working together, but they don't. And certain pay and they don't pay. It is so much involved. Neighboring rights came in some, when it showed up all of a sudden, something called neighboring rights. And I'm sure now there'll be more things come up because of AI and the training. There'll be more kind of societies will pop up and say, "Oh, this is AI neighboring rights."
Yeah, no, absolutely. I it's not covered in a book anywhere. There's some
No.
really good there's really good books. They're about 5,000 pages thick, and no one's going to try and sit and make their way through all of it. But if you spend enough time on the administration side, I was fortunate to have crossed both recording and publishing. So I really had a 360 view of different rights and neighboring rights in sync over the last, 5, 10 years. It's given me a very interesting perspective. One of the places though that I really got a good global view of how different and similar challenges could be was the AFEM and it's the Association for Electronic Music. It began as an organization called Pay for Play because a lot of the way that public performance works, right, is a bar or a club pays a certain annual license fee, and they
Ask upon
rarely,
BMI.
right, yeah, and they
Yeah.
rarely send in their set lists. So
Yes. Nobody
the
sends it.
the
Back in
way
the
that
day, I
money
remember.
that's right, the way that money gets allocated, right, is by streaming numbers or sales data. Depending on when the year was that all of that was being calculated, but there were all these clubs, and there still are today, probably not as many, but there was just this massive amount of new clubs for electronic music opening. These clubs, like any other bar, were not sending in set lists, and Bruce Springsteen would end up getting the biggest percentage of royalties from that club's membership and payments, right, their license fees. And so, what the AFEM really wanted to do was try and level the playing field and give the electronic music its fair share of royalty pools. But at the end of the day, it was just a segment of music, and still is, that desperately needed licensing and rights holder alignment. It needed systems and still does incentives to achieve that. And I still sit on some boards in that space. And while globally it's the same challenges, we have seen territorially some differences. Like in Europe now, there's a lot of technology that sits inside of clubs and monitors what's actually being played, and that is the reporting mechanism now to PROs. And so that's been a very interesting sort of technology improvement that's come in that space.
And what is that? All that money goes into a pool? It's not a lot
Yeah,
of money they pay monthly. Is it a monthly the
Yeah,
fee
well,
or the
it,
license?
it 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 adds up when you add up all of the public venues that are paying into this, and then the allocation of that. When those clubs do the allocations across, or when the performance societies do the allocations across, 150 million songs. When you have data from a club, it becomes much more powerful, and it does get you, sort of the responsible share of what was actually going on in that club and who the rights holders are behind it.
So this technology only implemented in Europe, you said, but not here, not in the States or
It's just
Canada.
taken a minute, Bob, to get here. It can be implemented here. Like anything else, it's who's going to pay for it, right? Who's got the most incentive to pay for it. The clubs don't need to pay for it. There's no law saying they have to have it. So I think it's really more about the sponsorship, and some smart companies have realized what the value of that data is, and they've sort of taken on the right to put this technology into venues. Yeah,
Wow, that could be like a hidden income radio, like the same way that you made money in the radio back in the days.
that's right.
It could be kind of the new way of generating more income for a lot of these artists. So this money, a lot of it not is being just lost, not even divided.
Yeah, it does ultimately end up in a in some performance rights organization or in a neighboring rights organization. Some of it goes into black boxes, right? We've heard there's billions in black boxes. And that those black boxes don't sit there forever. They get
Three
cleared
years,
out.
4 years, three
3 4
years.
years depending on the country, and they get cleared out, and those generally go to market share leaders. So
That's what I'm saying. The
as they
majority of
say,
this,
there's
this.
somebody told me a long time ago in music, when I got into music, they said, remember this, never forget it, Bob, there's profit in chaos. And that is the truth. There's a lot of, not a lot, there's a few big companies that profit from the chaos in music, and that's been one of the challenges to just bring music into standards as a whole.
Well, I mean, your experience and your knowledge and what OpenPlay did with its platform and what you guys did, yourself, Eddie, and Tracy,
Mhm.
Maddox, this, kind of going to change that because technology always going to change things. They're going to always tip the scale. You know that. And right now, technology cannot be held back. It's kind of forced its way in to many in the music industry and other industry. And it is, we might not like it, but it's correcting a lot of things. They're bringing things to more transparency, with the presence of AI and how fast, this kind of transition is happening. It
Yeah.
is making transparency part of it. There's no longer things could be shoveled or just ignored or just deleted.
It's interesting. AI has really aligned the creator and the rights holder community. Whereas we saw with the copyright directive in the EU, the creators wanted the freedom, right, to be able to use, creators
Yes.
being UGC creators for the most part,
Hmm.
wanted the freedom to
Yeah.
be able to use any music without limitation. Yet the rights holders felt there should absolutely be, guardrails put around that, and licenses that should be put in place, and tracking and reporting and monetization, responsible monetization. And it kind of put two sides at odds. And it's actually that the UGC creators, were ultimately, call it, the winners. The Article 17 laws didn't come down as some folks had thought they would. AI is a bit different, right? Like, AI is about everybody sort of being on in the music industry, whether you're UGC creator or original creator, you're still all about, like, hey, we all want this content out there. We just want it to be identified as AI. We want it to have been trained ethically. We want it to be attributed properly. And nobody other than potentially some of the unethical AI companies are against it. So I do think we are going to see AI drive us into new levels of transparency and rights attribution over time. It's a convergence and cascade now of challenges and litigation and people doing deals, and who's waiting to see if deals are done, or if lawsuits go through, and should they be part of a class action suit, or should they be part of licensing. Everybody's trying to figure it out, but we're starting to see some of these first big deals go through, very much like, when the first couple of Spotify big deals went through. And I think we're just going to see a lot of market inertia for sure over the next, year or two.
And let's not forget, blockchain will play a big role in that.
Blockchain is the absolute right technology for tracking music attribution and rights. The challenge, as you know better than anybody, with blockchain is it got too caught up in the whole NFT space, and
Correct.
when the NFT ship went down, it took blockchain with it, right? So now,
Well, it took the reputation, the
100.
whole image of it. Yes, the kind of what it preserved to be, But now we changing that here. Myself and at NFITS, my company, obviously, I've been really championing that, and we're gonna change this, and because our whole purpose is really advocating and helping the industry. I've been in it for 30 years. I've been in the distribution business for 30 years, so I've seen it all, and I know the chaos, I know the mess, and I know how a lot of independent artists, a lot of their their identity and power, it's been taken away from them, and their love for music and rights and generating revenue that's been lost and never been paid to. So I think myself and having people like yourself and OpenPlay on our side to bring that to life and say, hey, the blockchain wasn't just about NFTs. It's a lot more than that. NFTs was one asset was created from it, but there's a much more if we look into it, because you can tokenize, you can register anything from real estate to stocks, bonds, artists, energy, water. I mean, the list goes on and on. How would this become a mainstream thing, a traditional thing, a mainstream? That's our job, is to bring the blockchain to the mainstream. And there's other company bringing it. A big company that we're working with, actually, they tokenizing energy, liquid energy that actually used for data centers for cooling off. A big company, yeah, here in Texas, actually.
The concept of a distributed smart contract,
Yes.
there's no argument that there's a place for that in music, a real home for it. And if blockchain weren't didn't come out as sort of within the fabric of NFTs, and came out as its own standalone utility as an
Mhm.
application, we'd have more data on blockchain today than data that wasn't on blockchain, for sure.
Correct. 100% right. But things sometimes takes a minute to
Mhm.
evolve. And I would say blockchain had the technology and it was a bit advanced for everybody, especially the music business. It was a little too much. It's enough to fathom the idea of forgetting something that we made so much money from and we were part of it, the physical. We went to something called download and then streaming. So, it was, and then blockchain came in. It's like, no, we cannot take another technology that's going to take everybody's head for a spin. So now, with the acceleration of technology and AI and all kind of type of technology really just coming in the forefront, I think it kind of paved the way, and I would say created the path for the blockchain to come out on lips. Like, okay, it's safe now. Now you can come out and you can be part of this evolution and
Right.
just transition. Yes,
I agree.
100%.
Yep.
Yes, 100%. You know, um, I mean, there's so much to talk about here. This conversation, this interview really could go on for hours with your knowledge and background and your own, and what are you foreseeing and what do you experienced and gather throughout the years. But we're gonna try to capture as much as possible because I really was looking forward to this. I want to talk a bit more in depth about open play also and the plans you guys have for it because I kind of, when I went through that tour, the whole mindset behind it, how it's organized. I don't know how long it took to put this whole thing together, just to map it out. But throughout the tour, I said these guys did not leave any stone not turned. They went through every possible scenario that you could come across. It is actually, we have a solution. We have it here. This. So the mic is yours.
Well, yeah. Listen, we hear that a lot, right? We it's a double edged sword. We regularly, I mean, we'll do open play demonstrations daily throughout the day, whether it be a label, a publisher, a distributor, a catalog fund. All of the categories are clients in open play today. The company, and nobody explains it better than Edward Guinness, one of the co-founders. But the company was actually born inside of Concord because Concord was buying catalog, and they brought Edward in as a CTO and said, build a system that lets us know everything we own, where it exists, and whether or not we're monetizing it. Right. And Edward began the construction in a very thoughtful way inside of Concord, and solved that issue and realized, hey, this is a bigger industry issue than Concord. Everybody has the same challenge. And so he literally bought the company out, spun it out of Concord about 10 years ago. And in that time, brought two of the majors on board, large catalog funds. We've got Disney as a new client. We're now, Netflix is a client. We're moving into some of the bigger media companies are using it. At its core, it's a software, right? It's the industry's best software, no different than Salesforce and its CRM software. Back when Mark brought that company from being sort of a CRM into a business operating system. OpenPlay began as a catalog management system, and just kept building and building on it. And what OpenPlay has become over the years is the culmination of companies like Universal and Warner and the Disneys, and the Secretly distribution and Concord and Reservoir and Big Machine and Hive, and the list goes on of companies that all had the financial wherewithal and technical chops to build their own platforms to manage this content. But because of the nature of music and the dynamics of music and the nature of changing standards and DDEX compliance and CWRs and DSP uh, schemas and the rights that these different companies require or data and information. It just kept building and building, and it became the sort of metropolis of metadata, right? Like it became the home to any type of metadata that you could possibly want to manage, keep in a secure repository. And most importantly, Bob, the real beauty of OpenPlay is its relational databases, right? Very few companies that are operating their own catalog management are doing so outside of a flat file. They're doing it on, an Airtable, or they're doing it inside of Excel spreadsheet or, Google Sheets. And it becomes very difficult to relate data when you're doing that, right? To make data relatable. Music data is very, very um, rationalized across many rights holders, many identifiers, many protocols. And then when you start talking about multimedia, so OpenPlay houses video and audio. It's the only platform in the world where, as a label, you can put all of your live video, all of your social media, all of your lyric content, all of your official music videos in the same inventory, in the same repository as the music that its rights associated with, and it's all associated there, right? It's all there, and it's all easily relatable. So when we demonstrate it to folks, we generally get this jaw-dropping, theme of like, wow, just what you said. You guys sort of built everything in there. And it was really the clients that built it in there. It's turned into this SaaS model that, hey, if UMG needs 4 or 5 updates to the platform because there's some new Apple Motion graphic criteria that need to be passed along as part of a DDEX feed, that update goes to everybody in OpenPlay. So everybody becomes the beneficiary of it. And so I joined because OpenPlay had a vision of moving beyond being a utility, right? Just being the greatest piece of software out there for any label, publisher, or catalog to operate on. It wanted to get more into outcomes and solutions and breaking down the barriers that exist in music. Music is probably the most siloed industry I've ever seen. And, I could talk a little bit about Connect if you'd like, but
Yes, please.
Connect is all about building bridges, right? Connecting companies versus more silos. So, the it's Connect was designed to solve fragmentation. Connect is a business hub. It's a tech marketplace, and imagine the line of technology providers, data providers, other service providers in music that is formed where they could literally do a single integration into this marketplace and have access to thousands of labels and publishers that are inside of OpenPlay, not only for general commercial terms, but they also have now the full data integration because OpenPlay is the home for those labels and publishers of all their data and their rights and their ownership information, audio. So if a company provides stemming software, they could very easily integrate now through Connect with OpenPlay and become the stemming application for thousands of labels. The beauty of it for those thousands of labels is, as running a distribution company yourself, is, oh, I want to do stemming applications. I need to go do a commercial agreement with this company, and I need to know where their website is, and I need to create my permission and access to their website, and my finance team needs to make that subscription payment every month, and my ops team needs to be able to go in, transfer audio files in and out. Well, you start doing that across 10, 15, 20 companies, and before you know it, you're weighed down with infrastructure costs of trying to manage your business with all these great new technologies. What we're doing is we're saying, no different than, draw the akin again to Salesforce, and their app exchange. We're creating all of those native experiences for all those companies inside of OpenPlay. So you don't have to deliver audio to an audio shake to do stemming. That audio is in OpenPlay. You click on a button, it goes to audio shake, it comes back stemmed, and it's actually indexed and placed, fully associated inside of your library inside of OpenPlay. So we've got about a dozen categories. We've got over 100 music tech companies that are in queue to come into it. We've launched our beta. It's a private internal beta right now, with about 4 providers. We're going to expand and make all of our public announcements about it in January, but it will be music's first tech hub and open marketplace. Gives the rights holders control over their catalog and control over their business and access to all of these companies. It's interoperability, and from the tech provider side, it unlocks scale, right? And that's always been a challenge for them.
Have you guys thought of integrating something where, obviously by option, by choice of certain companies, where they have all the royalty statements go there and they can pull it out at any time, divided, and if kind of all the earnings per song, instead of pulling it from different places and having your own
Yeah.
system at the office or in your company. OpenPlay also could handle that. Is it something that you guys looking into the future, or?
So there's absolutely, Bob, companies out there that are doing pieces of that. What
Yes.
we're doing is we're curating a solution across multiple vendors for that particular category. So where OpenPlace Connect is this one-to-one marketplace where any label could do business with any one of these 100 companies. We also know that when you put one plus one together, sometimes you get three. And some of the magic is in combining what is in each of these silos and then bringing back more actionable or informed data to the user. And so the area you brought up, interestingly enough, is one of our areas for providing a curated solution. So we're working with 3 or 4 companies that are in that space. Some are great. One of the companies is great at finding where there's anomalies in data, right? Where a song might have been receiving a steady amount of streams and then for a quarter or two drops off and then picks right back up where it should have been, right? And there's clearly something wrong. Or the song starts taking off in 20 countries, but in 3 countries in the same region, it's not performing, right? Generally, those lead to errors, and those are drawn back to errors and omissions in metadata, missing files, and so forth. But there's a company that's great at anomalies. We have another company that's great at just ingesting every form of recording data imaginable, normalizing it, and putting it out into data and analytics. We've got another company that does that in publishing, and another company that does it across live, merch, and physical. And so when you combine all 4 of those, all of a sudden you have a solution that is the most holistic view. You literally could pull up an ISRC and look at anomalies in it, look at all of the recording data associated with it, look at all the publishing data and monies associated with it, and look at all the live merch sync and other
I,
data. And
so are you guys also gonna work or connected or in the works to work with, let's say, Sound Exchange, MLC? You'll be able to pull all of that within OpenPlay and CSAC, BMI, or ASCAP.
yeah. So generally, we any publicly available databases we can pull information in. Any sources of royalties or data that want their information shared, like the MLC wants their information shared, right? Because their mission is to make sure their black boxes get
Correct.
cleared out.
Yeah.
We do incorporate those data feeds. In music, there's not as many of those as you'd hope,
Yeah.
but we absolutely do incorporate them, and we'll allow clients to, if the client's the ones accessing the data, if the client's going into PPL and pulling out, a quarterly statement, these systems that we're building, these curated solutions, will allow you to upload and manage that as well. It is a
Mhm.
common ask. It's more common than I had expected since joining OpenPlay, that we're really starting to see folks better understand that the sources of their revenue are many. The aggregated data of all that revenue ends up being a bank statement, and there's a lot of actionable cross-functional data in between that's not available to them to use.
Hmm.
They are still trying to, run pivot tables and spreadsheets and combine it all into an Excel file and see what they could pull out. But especially with AI and low code, no code now, we're able to sort of take 4 or 5 companies' output and pretty quickly bring it together and bring that fully curated solution out to
Wow,
market.
so you guys pretty much basically bridge the whole business together, which is really needed to be. Very, very important.
It's about building
Um,
bridges. Yep.
yeah, yeah, but you bridged it. You actually bridged the whole business together. Really interesting. Very interesting. Bob, you've been around for a long time. I think an advice, the least we can ask for any entrepreneurs who really want to get into this game that we call the music industry. What's your advice to them? Stay out of it, go find another gig, or how do they want to carve their path? Listening to this amazing discussion we have on Soundbreaker with you, Bob, and Open Play, and your journey and your experience, what would you tell them to do?
The SoundBreaker podcast, right? Not podcast.
Podcast, man.
Um, through the years, I've done a bunch of mentoring at different incubators and accelerators, and whether it's music or any other space, I wouldn't tell people to shy away from music. I would have them be thoughtful and careful around their expectations, excuse me, within music. While it's a big industry, it's not as big as some might think. When you really start doing some, TAM analysis of really what addressable markets are for a particular product. But what I see, Bob, all the time, whether it's in music or it's in food or it's in pharmaceuticals or transportation, I see founders that take their own problems, real problems, but it's their own problems. They launch a startup, they solve it with tech, and then they try to convince the industry that the industry is having the same problem as them. And there's no doubt that their problem was real, but I tell them all, if it's not too late, don't start with your problem. Use your problem as a launch pad, but start by validating industry problems, right? There's plenty of industry problems that large swaths of the industry are willing to pay for, right? So don't go out and start with your solve, with your product, with your solution. Go out and talk about potential pain points and listen and listen and listen. Too often, these founders build better mousetrap. It is a better mousetrap. However, the market doesn't see it as big a pain as the founder, right? Yeah, your mousetrap's bigger and faster. But guess what? My mousetrap still works. And it's just more convenient for me to stay with it because I've built trust with my mousetrap. And what you end up having is the founder that owns this new mousetrap that's invested in a solution to a problem that really didn't exist at an industry level. And what somebody told me, in the investment space when I was doing some advising to some VC funds is, hey, being early is often the same as being wrong. When you're a
Well, I
startup,
never heard of that one before.
right?
Being early is the same as being wrong sometime.
Right.
Sometime.
And if you're not solving a pain that buyers actually feel, value, and are willing to spend money on, you don't really have a business. You have a passion project, right?
Got it. Interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting take. Quick question. I'm sure it has a long answer, but we'll try to make it shorter. The future of music monetization. You know, the only form that's been known to the music industry for the past, I would say, 20 something years after physical digital download, then streaming became, and obviously micro licensing, what you just
Mhm.
see, YouTube, Facebook and TikTok and all of that.
Well, I think you and I see it through the same lens. Your lens is really colored in a way that blockchain is an important part of it, and I don't disagree. The way I look at it is the industry still hasn't solved the most fundamental problem, which is accurate, verifiable ownership data. Right. That's at the core of this entire music industry. Right. And we had joked about it, you and I, before, about there's profit in chaos. Right. And so there's a reason behind some of the chaos that exists in music. But everything we want to build, AI licensing, sync at scale, not we at OpenPlay, but the industry as a whole, UGC monetization, fractional ownership, catalog investment, automated royalties, it all in the end depends on clean rights data. And the truth is, the industry still operates arguably with even more fractured data than before. Um, and that data ends up being inconsistent and incomplete. And so, an example would be, I'm working with a large independent label that recently acquired a nice mid-sized catalog. On paper, it had strong earnings, but when we ran a forensic analysis, more than 28% of the catalog was either misregistered, unregistered, or incorrectly split across songwriters at one or more PRO, CMOs, DSPs.
Hmm.
Fixing that data. So OpenPlay helping that client find those errors and omissions, fixing that data increased annual royalties by 40%. That's not with new catalog. That's not from new streams. That's from not from additional sync placements. That's cleaning metadata, right? And good data in is better data out, right? And so those are revenues that sit in black boxes, are unmatched. They're sitting in conflict, not being paid. This is a problem that a lot of companies have built some silos around all different little pieces of it, right? We're now seeing companies that, in the most myopic example, there's a company that does just scanning of the top 2,000 brands on TikTok to find use of music in social media on TikTok by those brands, enables a label to cross-reference it back to their licenses and identify where a brand might be using it, right? That's about as thin a silo, an inch wide and a mile deep, as you could get. The challenge for the rights holders is, how do I ever do business with the 20 of those silos that give me the complete picture, help me get all of those royalties? And not to bring it back to Connect, but to me, that's where the future ends up being, is the ability to seamlessly utilize all of these great companies, all these great technologies, all that exists out there. That really is helping overcome some of the efficiencies that generally starts with bad data at
Correct.
the beginning of the pipeline.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I truly enjoyed. Again, I'd say we would probably go on for an hour or two more, but we need to be careful with our audience. We don't want to bore them. But this is an important subject. You should really. I mean, I would give master classes if I had your knowledge. I'll straight up. I'll monetize on it. Absolutely. Bob, it was definitely a pleasure having you on SoundBreaker podcast. I truly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience gonna love it more. Find it extremely educational and insightful. Really.
This was really a pleasure. I could, as you said, I could talk for hours on it, and I'm sure we will over the coming years. But thank you very much for having us, and all the kind words you said about OpenPlay.
Absolutely. It's the truth. Nothing but the truth. Again, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. And for our audience, please follow us on socials and tune in for new episodes. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share the SoundBreaker podcast. And if you are joining us on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time.